For thousands of years, the Silurians had ruled their corner of the galaxy not with warships or fire, but with science, a quiet weapon more terrifying than any army. Their secret was a liquid, clear and odorless, called Serum 7, a creation so advanced that it could bend the mind of any intelligent creature, breaking will and planting obedience like a seed. Entire civilizations had fallen to this invisible force, and not a single soldier had to raise a weapon. The serum didn't just control thoughts, it rewrote them, turning leaders into loyal servants and rebels into worshippers. No species had resisted. When Earth was discovered, a small blue world full of chaotic creatures and unpredictable emotions, the Silurians didn't see danger. They saw opportunity. To them, humans were wild animals waiting to be tamed. A small fleet was sent, not with bombs but with vials. They chose a quiet town in northern Europe to begin the test. Airborne drones released the serum in mist form, and the effect was almost immediate. People slowed down. Conversations stopped. Eyes became dull. The Silurian commander, Velrix, observed from orbit and made a cold note in his log. Subject species, human. Initial compliance level, 97.6%. Expected full compliance within 48 hours. At first, everything seemed to be going according to plan. Local governments lost interest in resistance. Civilians took orders without question. But then, a strange thing happened. One of the test subjects, a man in his 30s with a mechanic's uniform, was brought in for examination. He smiled at the Silurians, calm and passive like the others. But when Velrix asked him a direct question, the man gave a reply that wasn't in the script. "You think this is working, don't you?" The room froze. The translator repeated the words twice, then blinked. The Silurians believed it was a glitch. But later that day, another human, a woman this time, laughed during her checkup, a sound full of irony. Laughter wasn't part of the behavioral pattern expected after full serum absorption. Velrix ordered a full scan of the town's population and found irregular brain activity in almost 3% of the subjects. These humans were not resisting, they were pretending. More curious still, the serum wasn't fading or breaking. It was active in their bodies, but the minds behind the eyes were somehow still free. Velrix tried increasing the dose. He sent stronger waves of the neurocontrol field, but nothing changed. In fact, the number of free thinkers began to grow. Soon it was 4%, then 6%, then 10%. By the third day, some of the humans were whispering to each other. One even scribbled something on a wall in messy handwriting. "We see you." Panic stirred in the control room. Velrix had seen other species collapse within hours. Resistance was impossible. The serum had always been perfect. But humans, it seemed, were not like the others. They had strange habits, unpredictable thoughts, and emotions that didn't follow logical pathways. When grief hit them, it made them stronger. When they were afraid, they became more dangerous. And now, the serum was doing something the Silurians hadn't planned for. It was learning from human minds. The neural feedback began to spread. Silurian monitors received bizarre signals, music, chaotic drawings, fragments of dreams, all projected from infected humans. The serum, meant to suppress creativity, had become a mirror, reflecting human thoughts back into the system. Velrix ordered an emergency containment. Soldiers in black suits entered the town to isolate the affected. But many of the humans no longer pretended. One, a boy barely 16, looked a soldier in the eye and said, "You can't control what you don't understand." And in that moment, Velrix realized something chilling. The serum hadn't failed. It had simply met a species that was too complex, too chaotic, too human. Earth was not just another planet to be conquered. It was a storm, loud, messy, and full of minds that refused to be caged. And though the Silurians didn't know it yet, their greatest weapon had just opened the door to their greatest mistake. The perfect serum wasn't perfect anymore. And the humans, they were just getting started. Far from the quiet European town where the serum first failed, in a hidden bunker deep beneath a broken city, Dr. Lena Morrow stared at a map filled with red zones, areas already under full Silurian control. She used to be one of the top neuroscientists in Europe, but now she was the leader of a small resistance made up of those who had somehow stayed free. Her bunker was full of damaged equipment, salvaged tech, and a few brilliant minds who had managed to avoid the serum's full effect. Across from her, sitting on a crate and cleaning his rifle, was Derek Kane, a former soldier who had lost his entire unit during the first wave. They had been exposed to the serum, but Derek had remained untouched in a sealed reconnaissance vehicle. He didn't speak much, but when he did, every word was sharp. Lena had spent weeks studying the brains of those who had resisted the serum. What she found was disturbing and fascinating. The serum had entered their systems, yes, but instead of shutting down higher brain functions, it had somehow awakened dormant parts of the mind. In some cases, it had even increased their mental strength. She noticed that creative thinkers, trauma survivors, and emotionally complex individuals were far more likely to resist or adapt, and now a new pattern was emerging. Those who had resisted were beginning to sense one another, forming unspoken connections, almost like a mental network, one not built by the serum, but in spite of it. Lena believed it was the human brain's natural chaos that made this possible. It didn't follow clean patterns like other species. It was unpredictable, flexible, and emotional. Derek, who had recently faked being under the serum's control, brought back news from a captured Silurian base. According to what he saw in their data panels, the aliens were panicking. Their analysis showed that more and more humans were adapting to the serum, not by becoming controlled, but by bending the serum around their own thoughts. The Silurians tried to adjust the formula, but it didn't help. In fact, the more they altered it, the more unpredictable the results became. Some humans who were deeply affected by the serum started to recover slowly, showing signs of memory, sarcasm, even dreams. The serum was not destroying them. It was triggering a silent battle inside the mind, and humans were starting to win. Lena and Derek decided to take a greater risk. Using stolen Silurian tech, they modified a helmet that allowed Lena to experience the neural activity of those who had resisted. When she put it on and connected to a young girl who had survived direct exposure, Lena felt something unbelievable. Music, colors, memories, and thoughts all twisted into something alive and moving. It wasn't just brainwaves, it was resistance in its purest form. And then, in the middle of the chaos, Lena heard a voice, soft but clear, say, "They don't know who we are." She pulled off the helmet, shaking, and realized the girl hadn't spoken a word out loud. The message had come through the connection. Telepathy? Not exactly. It was more like emotional transmission, as if their thoughts had touched across a deep ocean. Lena knew now that humanity wasn't just immune. It was evolving. Derek, meanwhile, was planning a bold mission. They needed to hijack a Silurian broadcast ship and send out a message across the infected zones. Not a call for war, but a signal of emotion, a spark to wake up the minds buried under the serum's influence. It was dangerous, almost suicidal, but it had to be done. With a small team, they made their way through the ruins of a city once known for art and poetry. Derek couldn't help but notice the strange symbols appearing on walls drawn by unknown hands, spirals, eyes, phrases like "still awake" and "not yours." The minds that had resisted were leaving signs, warnings, and maybe even maps. When they reached the broadcast tower, they found it mostly unguarded, abandoned by Silurians, who had started experiencing mental echoes from the humans nearby. Lena uploaded a simple audio file into the system. The laughter of a child, the sound of rain, a song played on a cracked violin, and a whisper that said, "Remember who you are." The signal was sent, and then they waited. Within hours, reports came in from across the globe, humans waking up mid-command, blinking, crying, running. Entire squads stopped moving, confused. The serum was losing its grip. But what scared the Silurians more than anything was this. Some of their own soldiers began to feel strange thoughts, alien, human emotions echoing inside them. One commander even began to draw, A flower, shaking hands, a tear. Back at the bunker, Lena looked at Derek and said, "This isn't just survival anymore, it's a new kind of war." And in that moment, they both understood. The war for Earth wouldn't be won with bullets or bombs. It would be won inside. The mind and the human mind, broken, wild, and unchained, was proving to be the most dangerous weapon in the universe. High above Earth, aboard the orbiting Silurian command vessel Xantheris, chaos had begun to bloom like a virus, silent and unstoppable. What once was a perfectly ordered ship, where every officer followed protocol, where emotion was nothing more than chemical waste, was now filled with strange behavior. Screens flickered with unfamiliar symbols. Crew members reported hearing voices or seeing brief flashes of color in their vision, and worst of all, some had started dreaming, a phenomenon completely alien to the Silurian brain. Commander Velrix, who once oversaw Earth's conquest with cold certainty, now found himself staring at the data in disbelief. Something was wrong with the neural network they had connected through Serum 7. It was meant to bring total control, to suppress thought and rewrite identity, but now it was picking up echoes from the very minds it was meant to dominate. At first, Velrix believed it was a malfunction in the transmission relays, but the phenomenon spread too quickly. Dozens of crew members began experiencing emotional spikes, reporting sadness, confusion, even awe, words that did not exist in their language until now. The Serum had opened a two-way door. Instead of controlling the humans, the Silurians had accidentally linked themselves to something far more dangerous, the human subconscious. Down on Earth, Dr. Lena Morrow noticed the shift too. Monitoring brain scans from both humans and captured Silurians, she discovered that the Serum was no longer just affecting behavior. It had started creating a feedback loop, copying emotional waves from humans and projecting them back into the Silurian hive. The loop was unstable and growing. What made humans strong, memories, grief, imagination, was now infecting the enemy. The more the Silurians tried to adjust the Serum, the deeper the feedback became. Their own minds, never designed for this kind of emotional input, began to unravel. Lena theorized that human brains, full of pain and beauty, had too many emotional layers for the Serum to manage. As a result, instead of controlling them, the Serum started learning from them, pulling thoughts, dreams, and symbols into the network. And since the Silurians were all connected, it spread like wildfire. Derek Kane, now coordinating with TUI, other resistance cells worldwide, took this as an opportunity. If they could amplify emotional signals using captured Silurian tech, they could weaponize human experience itself. Not with weapons, but with feelings, raw and unfiltered. Derek's team began broadcasting simple, powerful memories: the cry of a newborn, the roar of a crowd in celebration, the sound of a mother calling her child's name. These emotional signals weren't just audio files, they were charged with meaning, crafted to trigger chaos in the minds of their cold-blooded oppressors. Across the sky, alien ships began behaving strangely. Some stopped mid-flight, hovering without instruction. Others crashed without reason, their pilots overwhelmed by emotional storms they didn't understand. One Silurian officer even turned against his crew, drawing strange spiral symbols on the walls, whispering about light and color and the river of voices. The resistance began calling it the bloom, the moment when the mind awakened not in surrender but in awareness. Meanwhile, Velrix locked himself in his private chamber, watching his own thoughts twist. For the first time in his life, he saw images when he closed his eyes. He remembered his homeworld's cold sky, but now he felt something while remembering it. Was it regret? Or longing? He didn't know the word, but it scared him more than any weapon. Lena, monitoring his ship from a hacked uplink, realized that even the most powerful minds among the Silurians were breaking down. But she also knew this chaos couldn't be left unchecked. If the feedback loop grew too large, it could destroy both species. There needed to be a way to control the spread without killing the connection completely. She began designing a counter-signal, not to stop the feedback, but to guide it. A focused beam of human emotion, filtered and shaped, could teach the Serum to harmonize instead of destroy. It was risky, but time was running out. Derek prepared a team to deliver the signal from a fallen satellite tower in South America, one of the few places still outside Silurian jamming fields. While his team moved, strange signs began to appear globally. Animals acting unusually calm, humans dreaming in synchronicity, and even reports of Silurians helping injured humans escape patrols. The network was merging minds, not erasing them. When Derek reached the tower, he uploaded Lena's signal, a gentle sequence of human feelings, fear, hope, sorrow, and laughter, stitched together like a song. As the pulse went out, something incredible happened. Across both Earth and orbit, minds paused. For a few seconds, no one spoke, no machine beeped. Then, on the Silurian mothership, a young officer blinked and said, in a human voice, "What am I?" The bloom had reached the heart of the enemy. The feedback loop had done more than sabotage. It had awakened something that was never meant to feel. And now, no one, not even the Silurians, could predict what would come next. The skies, above Earth, were no longer silent. They pulsed with tension, humming with unseen signals and strange energy as the feedback loop continued to grow, crossing boundaries neither human nor Silurian had ever imagined. On the ground, cities once drowned in silence now buzzed with life, confusion, and something dangerously close to hope. All across the world, people were waking up, not just from the Serum's control, but from something deeper, like stepping out of a long, dark dream. Those who had never been affected started joining with the ones who had broken free, forming scattered pockets of resistance. Derek Kane, standing atop the ruins of a crumbled government building, looked out over one of these new gatherings. Survivors, former scientists, ex-soldiers, even children, all united not by orders but by a growing belief that the war was shifting. The enemy wasn't unbeatable anymore. But the most shocking change wasn't on Earth. It was happening in orbit, aboard the Silurian motherships where the once orderly alien command structure had collapsed into quiet panic. Commander Velrix, once a symbol of unshakable control, now walked his corridors in silence, passing soldiers who sat on the floor muttering to themselves or drawing shapes on the walls. One crew member was caught humming a human lullaby without knowing how he had learned it. Some refused orders. Others asked questions no Silurian had ever dared ask. Why are we doing this? Who are they? Who are we? The Serum, now corrupted by human emotion, had shattered their perfect logic. The very tool designed to control had become a mirror, and what it showed them was terrifying. A reflection filled with feelings, memories, and dreams they could not explain. But not all Silurians broke. Some, desperate to restore control, activated emergency protocols, launching attacks on newly freed cities in a last attempt to crush the uprising before it spread too far. Huge dark ships descended without warning, releasing mechanical enforcers that hunted any human showing signs of resistance. In one of these cities, Lena Morrow found herself trapped inside a research bunker with her team as the enemy approached, but she wasn't afraid. Her hands moved quickly over the console, amplifying the emotional frequency signal, the one that had started waking people up. This time, she tuned it to a single emotion: defiance. The sound waves blasted through the city like an invisible fire. People who had been hiding in silence suddenly stood up. A boy no older than 10 picked up a metal rod and swung it at a drone, sparks flying. An old woman stepped in front of a marching enforcer and shouted words in her native tongue. Words that made no sense to the machine but were filled with courage. Across the rooftops, Derek and his fighters struck from above, moving like shadows, disabling control units, hacking Silurian signals, and using stolen helmets to broadcast loops of human memories, not just happy ones, but raw, painful. Ones too: loss, betrayal, love, sacrifice. These were things the aliens could not understand but now could feel, and it tore at them like a storm. One by one, the machines began to slow, some even turning on each other in confused violence. More and more Silurians on the ground froze. During battle, overcome by visions, a mother's hug, the sound of waves, fireflies in a jar, and for the first time they hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Human forces struck hard. No longer hiding, They fought not just to survive, but to protect what the enemy had failed to grasp: the soul. Velrix, watching the chaos from above, finally understood the depth of their mistake. They hadn't just invaded a planet. They had invaded a species whose strength came not from technology or unity, but from chaos itself. Human emotion, once seen as weakness, had turned out to be their shield. And now, their sword. Velrix gave a final order to disconnect the Serum network, to pull back and retreat. But it was too late. The feedback loop had become self-sustaining, powered now by billions of human minds rising together. As systems failed and connections broke, the Silurian flagship shuddered. Strange data flooded its core: poetry, laughter, rage, forgiveness, and somewhere deep within, a spark caught fire. One of the ship's AI interfaces, never meant to think beyond orders, began composing a melody. It echoed through the halls like a heartbeat. The uprising had become more than resistance, and it was evolution. On Earth, Derek stood beside Lena as the last enemy drone dropped from the sky, lifeless. Around them, the city breathed again. Fires burned in the distance, yes, but so did lights in windows. People were singing. Somewhere in the crowd, a Silurian who had refused the retreat order stood with her hands raised, not to fight, but to listen. The war was not over. There would be more battles, more scars. But something had changed forever, Lena whispered to no one in particular. They tried to rewrite our minds. We rewrote the universe instead. And the uprising, once a flicker in the dark, had become a fire too bright to ever be controlled again. The war was no longer fought with weapons or ships or traditional battle plans. It had shifted into a space that neither humans nor Silurians had fully understood before. This was the beginning of the Mind Wars, a conflict taking place in thoughts, memories, emotions, and unseen currents that passed silently between brains now changed forever by the feedback loop. The Earth had survived the initial invasion, but the real fight had just begun, and it was being waged inside every awakened mind. Dr. Lena Morrow stood deep inside the Resistance's new headquarters, an underground structure built within the ruins of an old subway system, surrounded by screens, displaying brainwave patterns from both species. She had mapped something extraordinary, a growing web of connections not created by any machine, but by the minds of people who had shared emotions through the corrupted Serum. These connections were now forming new types of communication, fast, wordless, and deeply emotional. The Serum, once a tool of slavery, had become the bridge to something beyond human. And yet, while some of the Silurians had broken away from their command and begun to explore these changes peacefully, the core of their empire remained firm, disturbed by what they called the Mind Plague. Their command council, still untouched by the feedback loop, had created a new weapon, Neurostorm, a digital virus designed to sever all connections between minds, whether Silurian or human. It would erase memories, collapse emotion-sharing paths, and return every being to isolation. If launched, it wouldn't just end the uprising. It would destroy the very thing that made humanity so dangerous: their ability to connect. Derek Kane, now recognized as the Resistance's lead strategist, volunteered for the most dangerous mission yet: infiltrating the last fully operational Silurian data core, located beneath the Arctic ice shelf, where the Neurostorm signal was being prepared. He and a small team of hybrid fighters, half human, half enhanced by the Serum's evolution, journeyed through frozen wastelands and magnetic storms, chased by loyalist Silurians who saw them as corrupted anomalies. As they moved, they felt the pressure in their minds, the tension of a growing mental battlefield where stray thoughts could echo across miles, sometimes as whispers, sometimes as screams. Lena remained in contact through a neural uplink, guiding them from afar, warning them of shifts in psychic pressure. Each of the fighters had experienced something strange: shared dreams, visions of places they'd never been, and even flashes of memory from Silurian minds. One of them, a former teacher named Malik, began painting symbols he didn't understand, ancient shapes that later matched old Silurian data on extinct species, that once showed emotional intelligence. It became clear to Lena that the Serum hadn't just connected humans to each other. It had tapped into something older, deeper, possibly buried in the evolutionary past of both species. When Derek reached the Arctic core, what he found shocked even him. The structure wasn't a factory or a lab. It was a memory vault, filled with containers that stored not code, but feelings. These were not just Silurian plans. They were experiences stolen from Earth. Love letters, last words, childhood laughter, and the sounds of 1,000 human moments. The Silurians had tried to understand humans by capturing what they felt, and now they planned to destroy it. The Neurostorm. Machine sat in the center, humming with quiet menace, ready to wipe clean the web of minds that had formed. But just as Derek prepared to place the charges to destroy it, he heard a voice, not aloud but in his head. A young Silurian technician, connected directly to the vault, had sensed Derek's presence, but instead of alerting guards, he shared something unexpected, a memory of standing in the rain on Earth for the first time, watching children splash in puddles. The technician didn't want the destruction either. He had felt joy, and it had changed him. Derek hesitated. Blowing up the vault would destroy Neurostorm, yes, but also the emotional bridge it represented. All the memories, all the connections. Lena, listening through the neural uplink, gave no order. She left the choice to him, and in that silence, Derek made a new plan. He didn't destroy the vault. He rewired it. Using Lena's counter-signal designs, he rerouted the Neurostorm transmitter to amplify the emotional frequency instead of erasing it. When it activated, the pulse was not one of destruction, but of memory. Across the planet and beyond, both humans and Silurians dropped what they were doing as floods of shared experiences poured through them. Old memories, new thoughts, and raw feelings surged across the network like lightning. On distant ships, Silurian commanders felt guilt. On Earth, soldiers who once feared the invaders now saw their sorrow. The wave didn't kill, it healed. Velrix, still hiding in the shadows of a collapsing command, felt the pulse wash over him and saw his entire life play backward. The cold training, the emotionless battles, and then a single image. A human child offering him a flower during the early occupation. He dropped his weapon and fell to his knees, whispering words he'd never learned, but now somehow knew. We are more together. The mind wars ended not with fire, but with feeling. Months later, humans and former Silurian soldiers began building a new kind of society, one not ruled by control, but guided by shared memory. Lena called it the Neural Dawn, and as Earth slowly healed, the stars above no longer looked like threats. They looked like places waiting to be understood, because in the end the most powerful force in the universe was not mind control, it was the mind itself, when it remembered who it truly was.